In northern Italy, there is a bank that does not keep gold in its vaults. It keeps cheese. Hundreds of thousands of wheels of Parmigiano Reggiano sit stacked on wooden shelves in climate-controlled vaults, watched by cameras, protected by alarms, and guarded around the clock. Each wheel is worth about $500. Together, they are worth close to $200 million. Local farmers deposit their cheese the way other people deposit savings, and the bank hands them loans against it. And when thieves in this region break into warehouses at night, they do not go for cash, or computers, or jewelry. They go for the cheese. Because in this part of the world, cheese is not just food. It is money. And in one form or another, human beings have treated it that way for most of recorded history. But the story of cheese does not start in a bank vault. It starts with an accident in a desert thousands of years ago, inside the stomach of a dead sheep. According to the oldest legend in dairy history, it happened somewhere in the deserts of the Middle East. A traveling merchant filled a pouch with fresh milk before setting out on a long journey. The pouch was made from the stomach of a sheep, which was completely normal at the time. Animal stomachs were the plastic bottles of the ancient world, light, tough, and watertight. What the merchant did not know was that a sheep's stomach contains something called rennet, a natural enzyme whose entire job is to curdle milk. As he rode through the desert heat, the milk sloshed against the lining of the pouch, hour after hour. Warmth, movement, rennet. Without realizing it, the man was operating the world's first cheese factory. When he finally stopped drinking, what poured out was not milk. It was a thin, watery liquid, whey, and beneath it, soft white lumps. He was hungry enough to try them, and they were good. Now, is that story true? Nobody can say. There were no written records, no names, no dates. But here is the thing. The chemistry checks out perfectly. Every herder who ever stored milk in a stomach pouch was one hot afternoon away from discovering cheese. It did not have to happen once. It certainly happened again, to different people who never knew about each other. What we can prove is remarkable enough. In 2012, scientists studying ancient pottery from Poland noticed clay fragments punched full of small holes, like a modern colander. When they evaluated the residue soaked into the clay, they found milk fat. Those fragments are 7,500 years old, and they are the earliest hard evidence of cheesemaking anywhere on Earth. People were straining curds from whey before the invention of writing, before the wheel, and before a single pyramid stood in Egypt. And that raises an obvious question. Why did ancient people bother? The answer is stranger than you might expect. Because for most of human history, adults could not drink milk. In every early human population, the body switched off its ability to digest lactose, the sugar in milk, after early childhood. An adult who drank fresh milk got cramps, sickness, and worse. Milk was baby food, and nature intended it to stay that way. But cheesemaking changes the math. When milk curdles, most of the lactose drains away with the whey. What is left, the curd, is low in lactose, high in fat, and packed with protein. Aged cheese contains almost no lactose at all. Cheese was not just a new food. It was a workaround for human biology. Thousands of years before our genes evolved to tolerate milk, cheese let people eat dairy anyway. And it solved one more problem, the biggest one of all. Fresh milk spoils in hours. Cheese lasts for months, sometimes years. In a world without refrigeration, cheese was a way of freezing time. Summer milk, saved for winter hunger. This decision to press curds into a solid block seemed small at the time. It was not. By the time the first great civilizations rose between the rivers of Mesopotamia, cheese was already old technology. Sumerian records from around 4,000 years ago list cheese among temple offerings, food considered worthy of the gods themselves. Ancient tablets describe dozens of varieties: fresh cheese, white cheese, cheese flavored with herbs. Cheese had gone from survival food to sacred food. Then, in 2018, archaeologists working in Egypt made a discovery that made headlines around the world. Inside the tomb of the Thames, a high official who served as mayor of the ancient city of Memphis, they found broken jars containing a strange whitish mass. When they analyzed it, the results were stunning. It was cheese. Solid cheese is more than 3,200 years old, the oldest ever found. But the analysis revealed something else, something darker. The cheese carried traces of the bacteria that cause brucellosis, a brutal disease that brings fever, sweating, and joint pain. and that spreads through unpasteurized dairy. The oldest cheese on Earth may also have been a deadly one. Whoever ate from that batch 3,000 years ago was gambling with their life and did not know it. The ancient Greeks, meanwhile, loved cheese so much they wrote it into their greatest stories. In Homer's Odyssey, when the hero Odysseus sneaks into the cave of the Cyclops, a one-eyed, man-eating giant, what does he find the monster doing? Making cheese. Carefully, with racks of drying curds and buckets of whey, like a professional. Even the monsters of Greek mythology kept a tidy dairy. Greek athletes trained on cheese, and Greek writers called it a gift from the gods. But it was Rome that turned cheese into an industry. Roman soldiers received cheese as part of their standard rations. Dense, long-lasting fuel for men who marched 20 miles a day under heavy packs. Around the year 65, a Roman writer named Columella recorded a complete, step-by-step manual for making cheese, which rented to use, how to press the curds, how to salt and age the wheels. It is so detailed and so accurate that a modern cheesemaker could follow it today. Rome even gave cheese its name. The Latin word cases are the ancestor of the English word cheese, the German case, and the Spanish queso. And a later Latin word for the molded form of cheese, formalism, became fromage in French and formaggio in Italian. Every time anyone, anywhere in the Western world, says the word for cheese, they are speaking a small piece of Latin. The empire fell 15 centuries ago. Its cheese vocabulary never did. Wealthy Roman houses had dedicated cheese kitchens. Roman markets sold smoked cheese, aged cheese, cheese from a dozen provinces. And everywhere the legions marched, through Gaul, across the Alps, into Britain, cheesemaking marched with them. The empire planted dairy knowledge across an entire continent. Then Rome collapsed, the roads emptied, the markets burned, trade across Europe fell apart, and cheese should have collapsed with it. It did not, because cheese found the one group of people in Europe with the time, the discipline, and the patience to save it. After the fall of Rome, Europe entered centuries of chaos. But behind the stone walls of monasteries, life ran on a strict, unbreakable schedule. Prayer, work, and a lot of that work was farming. Monks kept herds. Monks had cool stone cellars. Monks kept written records. And monks had something no peasant farmer could afford: time. Cheese needs months of patient turning, washing, and waiting. Monasteries were practically designed for it. Over the centuries that followed, monks did not just preserve Roman cheesemaking. They pushed it further than anyone before them. They discovered that washing a cheese rind with brine or alcohol grew bacteria that created entirely new flavors. Some of the most famous cheeses in the world today were born behind monastery walls. Munster, whose very name comes from the word monastery, and dozens more across France, Germany, and the Alps. And in the plains of northern Italy, around 800 years ago, monks engineered what might be the greatest cheese ever designed. They needed cheese that could survive years of storage without spoiling. So, they built enormous wheels, dense, hard, low in moisture, heavy with salt. They called the region's masterpiece Parmigiano. It could age for 2 years, 3 years, even longer, and only get better. Remember those bank vaults from the beginning of this video? The cheese inside them is the direct descendant of a monastery experiment from the Middle Ages. There is a story about the Emperor Charlemagne, written down by a monk about a century after it happened. Around the year 774, the emperor stopped at a monastery and was served a soft cheese with a white rind. Charlemagne, being an emperor, started carving off the rind and throwing it away, the way you might trim something spoiled. The monk hosting him gently pointed out that he was throwing away the best part. Charlemagne tried the rind, agreed, and ordered 2 cartloads of that cheese delivered to his palace every year. Whether every detail of that story is accurate remains debated, but it tells you what cheese had become, something an emperor would arrange annual shipments of. Not everyone was convinced. Medieval physicians spent centuries arguing about cheese. Some warned that too much aged cheese caused melancholy and nightmares. A popular saying held that cheese could digest everything except itself. Respectable doctors advised eating it only in lesser amounts, at the end of a meal, like a controlled substance. It did not matter. Europe was hooked. Some of the world's greatest cheeses were not designed at all. They were accidents, just like that first pouch of desert milk. The most famous legend belongs to Roquefort. The story goes that a young shepherd in southern France was eating his lunch of bread and cheese at the mouth of a cave when a beautiful girl passed in the distance. He abandoned the lunch and chased after her. When he returned, weeks later, according to the legend, his cheese was streaked with blue-green mold from the cave. He was hungry enough to taste it anyway, and it was extraordinary. That mold was Penicillium roqueforti, a fungus that lives naturally in those caves, and it turned an ordinary sheep's cheese into something people would fight over for centuries. In 1411, King Charles VI of France granted the village of Roquefort a legal monopoly. Only cheese aged in those specific caves could carry the name. Think about what that means. It is one of the first legally protected food names in history, the ancestor of every protected label on wine, ham, and cheese today, created 600 years ago, all because a shepherd chose a girl over his lunch. Across the Channel in England, a village in Somerset built its own legend. The caves of Cheddar Gorge held a steady, cool temperature all year, perfect for aging. By the 1100s, the cheese made there was famous enough that King Henry II bought it by ton for the royal household, and is said to have declared it the best cheese in Britain. The village gave its name to a technique: cheddaring, stacking, and turning slabs of curd to press out moisture. And that technique gave the world what is now one of the most copied cheeses on earth. Centuries later, when Queen Victoria married in 1840, farmers presented her with a wedding gift that summed up 1,000 years of English pride: a single wheel of cheddar weighing over 1,000 pounds. Cheese was no longer peasant food or monk food. It was a gift fit for a queen. If you find this video interesting, hit subscribe. We cover the hidden history of everyday foods every single week, and you will not want to miss what is coming next, because this is the point where the story of cheese stops being charming and starts getting dark. And this is where the story takes its darkest turn. For 10,000 years, cheese had been made the same way, by hand, on farms, in small batches, by people who knew their animals by name. Then, in 1851, a farmer named Jesse Williams opened something new in all places, a town called Rome, in upstate New York, the first cheese factory in America. One building, pooling milk from many farms, producing cheese on an industrial scale. Rome had given the world cheesemaking 18 centuries earlier. Now a town named after it would help end cheesemaking as the world knew it. Factories multiplied at incredible speed. Within 30 years, there were hundreds across America. Production exploded, prices fell, and cheese became cheaper than it had ever been in human history. But something else happened too, something uglier. With no rules and no inspections, some producers began to cheat. They skimmed the valuable cream off the milk, then replaced the missing fat with cheap lard and processed oils, pressed it into wheels, and sold it as real cheese. They called it filled cheese, and buyers had no way to tell the difference until it reached their table. The scandal poisoned the reputation of American cheese around the world. Foreign buyers, burned too many times, simply stopped buying, and American cheese exports collapsed. It took an act of Congress, a federal law passed in 1896 specifically targeting fake cheese, to begin repairing the damage. It was one of the first major food fraud laws in American history, and cheese was the reason it existed. Then came the invention traditional cheesemakers considered the final insult. In 1916, a Chicago businessman named James L. Kraft patented a method for grinding cheese down, melting it, blending it with emulsifiers, and sealing it in tins. It never aged. It never changed. It barely spoiled. Craftsmen called it an abomination. The United States Army called it perfect, and bought millions of pounds of it to feed soldiers in the trenches of the First World War. An entire generation of young American men came home with the taste of processed cheese wired into their memory, and the American grocery store was never the same. But the heaviest blow fell on the birthplace of cheddar itself. When the Second World War reached Britain, the government took control of the food supply. Milk was too precious for variety, so officials ordered all of it directed into a single, standardized recipe, one national cheese, nicknamed government cheddar. Before the war, hundreds of farms across England still made their own farmhouse cheeses, each one different, many with recipes centuries old. By the time the war and rationing finally ended, only a few dozen of those farms were left. Recipes that had survived the fall of Rome, the Black Death, and 1,000 years of turmoil quietly vanished in a single decade, killed not by disaster, but by paperwork. Despite everything, the fraud, the wars, the factories, cheese did not fade. It conquered. And nowhere did it conquer harder than the United States. American dairy grew so productive that by the late 1970s, the government faced a problem no empire in history ever had: too much cheese. To support struggling dairy farmers, Washington kept buying surplus dairy and converting it into cheese, because cheese keeps. By the early 1980s, the government owned more than 500 million pounds of it, stored in warehouses and even in caves. In 1981, it began handing out free 5-pound blocks to struggling families. Millions of Americans still remember government cheese, and the stockpiling never really stopped. Today, America's total cheese reserve sits at 1.4 billion pounds, part of it aging quietly in converted limestone mines deep under Missouri. And one American state turned cheese into an identity. Wisconsin, settled by waves of German, Swiss, and Scandinavian dairy farmers in the 1800s, now produces more cheese than most countries on Earth, over 3 billion pounds a year. It is the only state with an official master cheesemaker program, modeled on the old European guilds, requiring more than a decade of experience before a person can even apply. Wisconsin football fans proudly call themselves cheeseheads and wear giant foam cheese wedges on their heads in freezing stadiums. Somewhere, a medieval monk is smiling. Then pizza changed the game completely. As pizza spread from Italian immigrant neighborhoods to every corner of the planet, it dragged one cheese along with it: mozzarella, a cheese most of the world had never heard of a century ago, overtook cheddar to become the most eaten cheese in America and one of the most produced on Earth. Every pizza box is a delivery vehicle for the dairy industry. Even Asia fell. In Japan, South Korea, and China, places where most adults are lactose intolerant and dairy were never part of traditional cooking, cheese consumption has been climbing for decades, carried in on pizza, burgers, and cheesecake. Remember, aged cheese contains almost no lactose. The ancient workaround still works, and it is opening the world's biggest markets. The numbers today would be unimaginable to that desert merchant. The world now produces over 20 million metric tons of cheese every single year. The average American eats about 40 pounds of it annually. France alone produces so many varieties that its own president, Charles de Gaulle, once joked that a country with hundreds of different cheeses was impossible to govern. But this next part tends to catch people off guard, because in the modern world, cheese has picked up a strange new title: the most stolen food on Earth. Researchers studying retail crime have estimated that a shockingly high share of all cheese produced ends up stolen somewhere along the supply chain, more than any other food. And this is not shoplifters slipping a block into a coat pocket. This is organized crime. In Italy, gangs have tunneled into aging warehouses at night and hauled away hundreds of Parmigiano wheels at a time, each wheel worth about $500, untraceable once the rind is scraped, and impossible to tell apart from legal cheese on a plate. Which brings us back to that bank. The Italian bank from the beginning of this video accepts Parmigiano as loan collateral for a simple reason: the cheese is a better asset than most things people own. It cannot crash like a stock. It does not rust or rot in the vault. It ages, and as it ages, it becomes more valuable. If a farmer cannot repay the loan, the bank simply sells the cheese, usually at a profit. There are financial analysts in Italy whose job is to appraise cheese. Cheese has also developed an extreme in that most people never see. The most expensive cheese in the world is not French or Italian, it is Serbian. It is called Pule. It is made from the milk of endangered Balkan donkeys, and it takes 25 liters of milk to make a single kilogram. It sells for over $1,000 per kilo, making it more expensive by weight than silver. And on the island of Sardinia, there is a traditional cheese so extreme that selling it commercially is banned under European food law. Mars, a sheep's cheese that is deliberately aged with the help of live insect larvae. Guinness World Records has called it the most dangerous cheese in the world. Locals have eaten it at weddings and festivals for generations, and they have no intention of stopping. And in 2010, cheese officially left the planet. When the private company SpaceX launched its Dragon capsule on its very first orbital flight, the test cargo was kept secret until landing. Inside was a single wheel of French cheese, sent around the Earth and back as an inside joke by the engineering team. The first commercial spacecraft in history to orbit the Earth and return carried no astronauts, no satellites, and no experiments. It carried cheese. Step back and look at the whole journey. Cheese began as an accident inside a sheep's stomach, a mistake nobody planned and nobody recorded. Ancient farmers turned that mistake into the first great food technology, unlocking milk for a species that could not digest it. It was buried with Egyptian officials. It fed the armies of Rome. It survived the fall of an empire in candlelit monastery cellars, tended by monks who treated it like scripture. It made kings send for cartloads. It created the first protected food name in history. It was faked, outlawed, weaponized, rationed, and standardized out of existence. And it came out the other side stronger than ever, stored by governments in underground caves, guarded in bank vaults, hunted by thieves, and launched into orbit. It was survival food. It was sacred food. It was money. And it is sitting in your refrigerator right now, on your burger, on your pizza, in your sandwich. 10,000 years of history, waiting to be noticed. Not bad for an accident in the desert that nobody even meant to make. If this story surprised you, hit subscribe and drop a comment telling us which part of cheese's history shocked you the most. The deadly tomb cheese, the cheese bank, or the wheel that went to space. And like this video so more people can find it. We have a lot more hidden food history coming.